The first thing my daughter-in-law said to me that afternoon wasn't hello, it was, "Did you receive the invoice?" I was standing in my kitchen in Naperville, the late October light coming in low across the counter. I had just finished rinsing a coffee mug. I told her yes, I had seen it. "Good," she said. "The vendor needs payment by Friday or they'll delay the next shipment." I said I'd look into it. She ended the call before I could ask what I had actually called to ask. I stayed there a moment, the phone still in my hand. The dishwasher hummed. A truck moved slowly down my street. In the backyard, the oak tree had turned a steady shade of rust red. My wife, Linda, would have stepped out onto the patio to take a picture. She's been gone 5 years now, and sometimes I still turn to comment on things before I remember. The question I had meant to ask was simple. When is the grand opening? My son, Daniel, had been planning his physical therapy clinic for nearly 2 years. He named it Harbor Point Rehabilitation. He said it sounded stable, reliable, like something built to last. I contributed $320,000 to help him get it off the ground. That was most of what Linda and I had set aside beyond our retirement accounts. I taught high school physics for 29 years. Linda worked as a nurse manager at a regional hospital. We were careful people. We didn't gamble. We didn't speculate. When Daniel brought me his business plan and sat at my dining table explaining square footage and equipment costs, I believed in him. I didn't ask for equity paperwork at first. I suggested it once. He looked wounded. "Dad, it's family." So I told myself paperwork could wait. In the early months, he called every Sunday evening. He described the drywall going up, the smell of fresh paint, the delivery of therapy tables wrapped in plastic. He sent me photos of the reception desk before the sign was mounted. Those calls felt steady, organized. Then his wife, Marissa, took over the finances. She has a degree in healthcare administration. She's capable, efficient. That's what Daniel told me when he explained the shift. After that, the Sunday calls shortened. Then they came every other week, then occasionally, then only when something required payment. Invoices replaced updates. I told myself it was normal. Businesses are busy. Sons grow into their own lives. I have read enough advice columns to know that parents can become obstacles without realizing it. Still, there is a difference between stepping back and being moved aside. On the Friday after the invoice call, I drove to the clinic. It had been nearly 3 months since I'd visited. Marissa had once mentioned that construction noise made drop-ins distracting, and I respected that. The drive took about 35 minutes. Suburban traffic, stoplights, familiar roads. The building sat on a corner lot near a row of small restaurants and a pharmacy. When I pulled into the parking space, I noticed the sign immediately. Harbor Point Rehabilitation. Clean blue lettering. Mounted, not temporary. There were plants inside the window, framed artwork on the walls. A reception desk with someone seated behind it. 2 patients in chairs filling out forms. The clinic was open. Not preparing to open. Not almost ready. Open. I didn't go in. I stood on the sidewalk with my hands in my coat pockets and looked carefully. The lettering above the door showed faint watermarks from rain. The potted plants weren't new. They had grown into their space. The floor mat inside the entrance showed the kind of wear that doesn't happen in a week. I did the arithmetic quietly. I drove home. That evening, I called Daniel. It went to voicemail after 3 rings. I waited a few minutes and called again. Straight to voicemail. The next morning, I tried once more. Voicemail. I put the phone face down. Then I waited. I waited a full day before I called Marissa. She answered on the first ring. That told me something. "When did the clinic open?" I asked. There was a pause. Not long, just long enough to measure. "We had a soft opening about 5 weeks ago," she said. "We kept it small, mostly close colleagues." I let that settle. "I wasn't aware," I said. "Daniel didn't want it to feel like a big production," she replied. "He was already under pressure." I know my son. He has always carried pressure quietly. Before piano recitals when he was 8, before college presentations, before anything that mattered to him. I never imagined my presence would be categorized as pressure. "I put $320,000 into the clinic," I said evenly. "Yes," she answered, "and we're very grateful." Gratitude and inclusion are not the same thing. She told me Daniel would call that week. He did not. I am not an impulsive man. Linda used to joke that I could spend 10 minutes evaluating a restaurant menu before ordering something simple. I prefer understanding before action. But patience and passivity are different things. By Thursday evening, I had cleared my dining room table and laid out every document related to Harbor Point. Bank transfers, wire confirmations, emails, text messages, equipment invoices Marissa had forwarded over the past year. I keep records. It is a habit built from decades of grading labs and documenting classroom incidents. Paperwork has a way of clarifying what memory softens. When I arranged everything chronologically, a pattern began to appear. At the beginning, Daniel's emails referred to my contribution as an investment with family terms. No formal interest, no fixed repayment schedule, but he used specific language: silent partner, major milestones, ongoing transparency. The grand opening was, by any reasonable definition, a major milestone. That wasn't the only thing. Several invoices over the last 11 months referenced consulting services. The payee was listed as a numbered LLC, no website attached, no description beyond strategic advisory. The monthly amount was $2,900, 11 months. I am not an accountant, but numbers speak plainly when you give them time. The total came to $31,900. I did not remember approving a recurring consulting agreement. I did not remember discussing outside advisory support at all. I went back through the email chain. There was one brief message from Marissa last winter. We've engaged some additional business development support during the launch phase. No details, no contract attached. I folded that email and set it aside. The following morning, I called an old colleague of mine, Robert. He retired from corporate law 2 years ago. We meet occasionally for coffee. He listens more than he speaks. We sat at a small diner near the river. I slid the folder across the table. He read quietly while the waitress refilled our cups. After several minutes, he looked up and adjusted his glasses. "Do you know who owns this LLC?" he asked. "I do not." "You should." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. I went home and began the next step. Step 1, confirm ownership. Step 2, verify the lease structure. Step 3, obtain a complete accounting of expenditures tied to my contribution. I did not tell Daniel I was doing this. Silence in certain moments is not avoidance. It is preparation. Through a public filing search, I located the LLC registration. The managing member was listed as Paul Serrano, Marissa's brother. I sat back in my chair and read the name again. There are reasonable explanations for many things. Family businesses sometimes involve extended relatives. Consulting support can be legitimate, but legitimacy usually leaves a trail. I hired a part-time bookkeeper named Elaine, a retired woman who now does independent financial reviews for small organizations. She agreed to examine every expense tied to the clinic's launch funds. It took her nearly 2 weeks. During that time, Daniel did not call. I did not call him either. Each morning, I made coffee. I watered the small herb planters Linda once kept. I reviewed the paperwork again, slowly. I was not looking for betrayal. I was looking for clarity. On the 14th day, Elaine returned with a thin printed packet and a careful expression. We sat at my dining table. She walked me through the numbers. The consulting payments to Paul's LLC totaled $33,800 after tax adjustments. The contract provided no itemized breakdown of services. There were no deliverables attached, no detailed invoices beyond the monthly transfer confirmations. The funds had been drawn directly from the operating account into which my investment had been deposited. I listened. I asked a few procedural questions. Then I folded the summary neatly and placed it in front of me. There is a particular stillness that settles over a room when information shifts from suspicion to fact. I thanked Elaine for her time. After she left, I sat in the quiet house and looked at the oak tree outside my window. The leaves were nearly gone now. I picked up my phone. This time, I did not leave a voicemail. I sent a single message to Daniel. "Are you available Tuesday at 3 p.m. at the clinic? I'd like us to review something together. Please have Marissa there." Then I set the phone down, and I waited. Daniel replied 20 minutes later. Tuesday at 3 works. No emojis, no explanation, just the time. That told me enough. I spent the weekend organizing the documents in order, not to overwhelm anyone, just to keep the facts clean. Transfer confirmations on the left, expense summaries on the right, the lease copy in its own folder. Elaine's report clipped neatly at the front. When I taught physics, I always told my students that clarity wins arguments before arguments begin. If the numbers are correct, emotion becomes unnecessary. Tuesday arrived cold and bright. I drove to Harbor Point at 2:40 and sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before going inside. The clinic smelled faintly of disinfectant and new carpet. A small speaker near the ceiling played instrumental music at a low volume. A receptionist I didn't recognize looked up and smiled politely. "I'm here to see Daniel," I said. She led me down a hallway lined with treatment rooms. The walls were painted a quiet gray-blue. Framed anatomy diagrams hung evenly spaced. Everything looked orderly. Daniel was waiting in a small office at the back. Marissa was seated beside him, a laptop open, hands folded. Daniel stood when I entered. "Hi, Dad?" He looked tired, not defensive, just tired. I placed my folder on the desk and sat down across from them. "I'd like to go through a few things together," I said. No one objected. I began with the simplest document, my initial transfer, the date, the amount, the confirmation number. I slid it forward. Then the email where Daniel described my role as a silent partner with transparency on major milestones. Then the monthly consulting payments. I did not accuse, I did not speculate. I simply placed each paper down and said, "This is what I see." Marissa leaned forward at the consulting summary. "Paul provided strategic launch support," she said. "Vendor negotiations, marketing outreach." "Can you show me the deliverables?" I asked. She paused. "We didn't formalize it in that way." Daniel looked at her, then back at the paper. "I thought it was temporary," he said quietly. "It was temporary," she replied. "The launch phase." "It lasted 11 months, I said, still even. Silence settled in the room, the kind that forces people to hear themselves think. I opened the lease copy next. "Daniel, did you sign this personally?" He nodded. "It required a personal guarantee," he said. "That's standard." Marissa shifted in her chair. "You're individually liable if the clinic fails," I said. "Yes," he answered. That was the first moment his posture changed, not toward me, toward the reality of the page in front of him. I watched him read the clause again, slowly. In that moment, I wasn't angry. I was concerned, because the structure of this business had not been as balanced as I was led to believe. Funds were leaving the operating account. Personal liability rested on Daniel alone. Oversight was minimal. Facts, once visible, carry their own weight. "I'm not here to attack anyone," I said. "I'm here to make sure we understand what's happening." Marissa's composure tightened slightly. "We've been transparent," she said. "Transparency," I replied gently, "requires access before discovery." Daniel exhaled. "I should have reviewed everything more closely," he said. That sentence shifted the room. Not toward blame, toward acknowledgement. I nodded once. "This isn't about punishment," I said. "It's about structure." I slid Elaine's summary forward. "These payments total $33,800. There are no detailed invoices. I need a written accounting of services rendered and a repayment plan for any unsupported expense." Marissa opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. Daniel spoke first. "That's fair." She looked at him. "That's not what we agreed," she said quietly. "We didn't agree to this," he replied. "We just moved." The music in the hallway continued softly. A door opened somewhere down the corridor. Someone laughed briefly in another room. Inside the office, no one laughed. I folded my hands on the desk. "I'm giving you 2 weeks," I said. "A full accounting, in writing. We can review it together." There was no shouting, no raised voices, just paper between us. I stood. Daniel walked me to the front door. Outside, the air felt colder than it had earlier. "I didn't realize how much was being transferred," he said quietly. I looked at him carefully. "You signed the authorizations," I said. I trusted, he answered. I nodded. Trust is not the same as supervision. That's something you'll need to fix, I told him. For yourself. I got in my car and drove home. Then I waited. The 2 weeks passed without interruption. No late-night calls, no defensive messages, no attempts to renegotiate through text. I continued my routine. Morning coffee, a short walk through the neighborhood, light maintenance around the house. I sorted through old files in my study, the kind Linda used to label with careful handwriting. There is something steadying about paperwork when emotions are unsettled. On the 12th day, I received an email from Marissa's accountant. Subject line, full financial summary, Harbor Point rehabilitation. Attached were 3 PDF documents and a proposed repayment schedule. I did not open them immediately. Instead, I wrote down 3 questions on a notepad. Do the numbers reconcile? Are the services documented? Is there a corrective structure moving forward? Only then did I begin reading. The first document was a complete operating ledger from the clinic's opening through the current month. Every expense categorized: equipment, rent, payroll, utilities, marketing. The second document detailed payments made to Paul's company, 11 transfers, each labeled Strategic Consulting. There were brief summaries now attached: vendor research, branding input, outreach coordination. None of it was itemized, no hourly breakdown, no measurable deliverables. The third document was the proposed repayment plan. Total amount to be repaid, $3,400. Monthly installments over 18 months, beginning the following month. Automatic transfer from clinic revenue. I reviewed the numbers carefully. They were internally consistent. The accountant had done competent work. That evening I called Robert. He listened while I walked him through the documents. Is the repayment realistic? I asked. Yes, he said, assuming the clinic remains stable. It appears to be improving, I said. Then this is corrective, not destructive, he replied. That was important to me. I did not want collapse. I wanted alignment. The next morning, I sent a short email to both Daniel and Marissa. I accept the repayment schedule with one condition: effective immediately. Any expenditure over $5,000 requires my written acknowledgement. This is not about control, it is about clarity. Marissa responded first. We need to discuss internally. Daniel replied 30 minutes later. That's reasonable. By evening, Marissa confirmed agreement. There was no warmth in the message, but there was compliance. Sometimes order returns before comfort does. The first repayment arrived on the 1st of the next month, precisely as scheduled. I printed the confirmation and placed it in a new folder labeled Harbor Point Repayments. On the second Sunday of that month, Daniel called at 7:15 p.m. Not about an invoice, about occupancy. We're averaging 68% booking on weekdays, he said. Higher than projected. I listened, asked 2 questions about referral sources, one about equipment maintenance. The conversation lasted 14 minutes. It felt steady. Over the following weeks, the rhythm continued. Calls resumed every Sunday. Short, practical, transparent. Daniel began mentioning things before they happened. A potential new hire, a marketing initiative, a plan to expand weekend hours. He spoke more slowly than before, as if he were thinking through decisions rather than announcing them. Silence, when used correctly, can recalibrate relationships. Late in March, he called on a Wednesday afternoon. Dad, he said, we're considering purchasing an ultrasound therapy unit. It's $18,400. I wanted to run it by you. He emailed the vendor quote while we were on the phone. I reviewed it carefully. Send me the service agreement, I said. He did. The paperwork was complete. I replied with a single sentence. Approved. There was a pause on the line. Thank you, he said. That phone call carried more weight than the clinic's opening ever could have. Not because of authority, because of inclusion, but the relationship was not fully restored yet. There was still something unaddressed. I had never stepped inside Harbor Point as a welcomed guest. I had stood on the sidewalk once. I had sat in the back office to review discrepancies. But I had not walked through the clinic as the father who helped build it. One evening in early December, Daniel called again. Would you come by Friday after hours? He asked. Just us. I asked what for. Dinner, he said. Small. I agreed. Friday arrived cold and quiet. The clinic lights were dimmed when I entered, the front desk dark, treatment rooms closed. Daniel and Marissa were in the staff kitchenette at the back. There was takeout on the table, paper containers, a small string of white lights taped along the window frame. It wasn't a grand opening, it was something quieter. I set my coat on the chair and sat down. Then I waited for someone to speak. The staff kitchenette was smaller than I expected. A folding table, 4 mismatched chairs, a refrigerator with patient reminder magnets on the door. The overhead light was bright, almost clinical, but the string of white lights Daniel had taped along the window softened it a little. Marissa handed me a paper plate. Chicken shawarma, she said, from next door. Thank you, I replied. We sat. For a few minutes we ate quietly. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space between sentences. Outside, a car door closed in the parking lot. Daniel cleared his throat. We should talk, he said. I set my fork down. Yes, I said. Marissa folded her hands on the table. I want to acknowledge, she began carefully, that the consulting payments were not structured properly. Not defensive, not apologetic, just measured. They should have been documented more clearly. Daniel looked at her, then at me. I didn't review the transfers closely, he said. That's on me. I nodded once. I'm not here to assign blame, I said. I'm here to define reality. The words were plain, no emphasis. The funds were used without full transparency. The repayment schedule corrects the financial portion, but the structural issue was oversight. Marissa inhaled slowly. My intention wasn't to hide anything, she said. Paul helped during the setup. It felt natural to compensate him. Did you disclose the relationship in writing? I asked. No. That would have been step 1. Silence followed. Daniel leaned back in his chair. I should have insisted on clearer boundaries, he said. Yes, I replied. There was no anger in the room, just recognition. I continued carefully. When you opened the clinic without informing me, that was a signal. Not about money, about positioning. Daniel looked down at his hands. I thought keeping it small would reduce stress, he said. For you? I asked. He hesitated. Yes. And did it? He shook his head slightly. Marissa looked between us. We were overwhelmed, she said. Cash flow was tight the first 3 months. We were arguing. It felt easier not to add another layer. I am not a layer, I said gently. I am part of the foundation. That settled differently. No one spoke for a moment. Outside the kitchenette window, a light snow had begun falling, thin, steady flakes catching in the parking lot lights. I reached into my coat pocket and removed a small envelope. I brought something, I said. Inside was a copy of the original email Daniel sent 2 years earlier describing my role. I slid it across the table. Read that again, I said. He did, slowly. Silent partner, major milestones, ongoing updates. When he finished, he looked up. I meant that, he said. I know you did, I replied. Marissa's voice was quieter now. I didn't realize how much being included mattered, she said. It matters, I said, because inclusion is respect. No raised voices, no accusations, just structure being restored. I'm not withdrawing, I added. I'm not threatening legal action. The repayment plan stands. The new spending threshold stands. What changes now is process. I spoke plainly. Major decisions are discussed before they happen. Financial relationships with family members are disclosed in writing. Personal guarantees are understood by both spouses. That protects all of you. Daniel nodded. Marissa nodded as well. There was something different in her expression now, less rehearsed, more reflective. I can agree to that, she said. Dinner continued after that. The conversation shifted gradually. Patient numbers, marketing adjustments, a new referral from a local orthopedic group. Nothing dramatic. When the containers were empty, Daniel gathered the trash. Marissa wiped the table. I stood and put my coat back on. At the door to the hallway, Daniel paused. "Dad," he said quietly, "I should have invited you." "Yes," I answered. That was enough. We turned off the lights together. Then I stepped out into the cold night air. The first repayment arrived exactly as scheduled, first of the month. 8:12 a.m. automatic transfer. I was already awake. I always am by then. I checked the account once, printed the confirmation, and placed it in the folder. No commentary, no follow-up call. Consistency is louder than apology. Over the next few months, the payments continued without delay. The amounts matched the agreed schedule precisely. No rounding, no adjustments. Daniel's Sunday calls became steady again. Not long, 15 minutes, sometimes 20. He would sit in his office with the door closed and walk me through the week. New patient intake, insurance reimbursements, a staff scheduling issue. I didn't advise unless asked. I listened. One afternoon in April, he mentioned a referral contract from a sports medicine group. "They want to send post-surgical cases," he said. "Higher complexity." "Do you have capacity?" I asked. "We're at 74% weekday occupancy." "Then review staffing before you sign," I said. He paused. "I will." There was no defensiveness in his tone anymore, just thoughtfulness. The ultrasound machine purchase went smoothly. The vendor invoice arrived. I acknowledged it in writing. Daniel forwarded the service agreement and warranty confirmation afterward without being prompted. Process had replaced assumption. Marissa, for her part, sent quarterly summaries voluntarily. Clean spreadsheets, clear line items. The consulting payments to Paul's company had stopped entirely. There were no further transfers. In June, I received a short email from her. "For the record, we've formalized our internal financial review procedures. 2 signatures required for any transfer above $3,000. I read it twice. It wasn't an apology. It was structural change. That mattered more. One evening in late summer, Daniel called unexpectedly on a Thursday. "Dad," he said, "we're finally profitable." His voice carried something lighter this time. "That's good," I replied. "I wanted you to know first." There it was. Inclusion. A week later, I visited the clinic during operating hours for the first time since everything had settled. Not to investigate, to observe. The waiting room was fuller than before. The plants were trimmed neatly. The receptionist greeted me by name. Daniel walked me through the treatment rooms, introduced me to 2 therapists, showed me the ultrasound unit mounted cleanly against the wall. No ceremony, just quiet acknowledgement. As we stood near the front desk, a patient approached Daniel to thank him for helping with a shoulder injury. I stepped back slightly, allowing the moment to belong to him. When the patient left, Daniel turned toward me. "This place wouldn't exist without you," he said. He didn't mean the money alone. I understood that. Later that evening, I drove home slowly, the radio on low volume, the sky clear. The repayment plan still has 9 months remaining. I track it the same way I track my utility bills, orderly, predictable. But what changed wasn't the money, it was the structure around it. Daniel reads what he signs now. Marissa documents what she authorizes, and I no longer feel managed. I feel included. Not as a silent partner, as a father who is taken seriously. Some repairs happen through argument, others happen through documentation. This one required both. The leaves began turning again in October, almost a full year since the day I stood outside the clinic without going in. I don't stand outside anymore. I walk through the front door, and I'm expected. Last Tuesday, I did something very ordinary. I cleaned out a drawer in my kitchen, old instruction manuals, rubber bands that had hardened, a faded takeout menu from a restaurant that closed years ago. I threw most of it away, kept only what still served a purpose. Order has always calmed me. Afterward, I made a cup of tea and stood by the window. The oak tree in the yard is nearly bare again. The seasons don't pause for anyone's family disagreements. They move forward whether we are ready or not. The repayment transfers still arrive on the 1st of every month. I no longer check the account first thing in the morning. I know they will be there. On the 2nd Tuesday of each month, I visit Harbor Point for coffee with Daniel. We sit in the small office at the back. He updates me on occupancy rates, staffing adjustments, equipment maintenance. I listen. Sometimes we talk about business, sometimes we don't. Marissa joins us occasionally. The conversations are steady now, structured. There are spreadsheets. There are printed summaries. Nothing dramatic. I never did attend a grand opening. But a few weeks ago, Daniel asked if I would stand beside him while he spoke at a small community health fair. He introduced me simply. This is my dad. That was enough. I've learned something I wish I had understood earlier. A written agreement is not a sign that love is missing. It is a sign that love is being handled carefully. It says, this matters enough to protect. It prevents confusion from turning into resentment. If you are a parent who has invested in a child's dream and you feel that quiet discomfort settling in your chest, pay attention to it, not with anger, not with suspicion, just attention. Ask questions calmly. Request documentation respectfully. Pause before reacting. Step 1. Gather facts. Step 2. Define expectations. Step 3. Hold steady. Silence can be powerful when it is chosen, not forced. I don't know what conversations happen in Daniel and Marissa's home now. That's their marriage, their responsibility. What I do know is that the clinic stands on clearer ground than it did a year ago, and so do we. Sometimes I think about other parents I've known over the years, colleagues who quietly co-signed loans, friends who funded startups without paperwork because it felt uncomfortable to ask. Not all of those stories ended with calm Tuesday coffees. If you're in that position right now, you're not alone. And you're not wrong to want structure. If this story felt familiar to you, I'd appreciate it if you'd take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people find these conversations. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always find it grounding to see how far these quiet stories travel. 2 other stories many viewers found meaningful will be appearing on your screen next. Take care of your paperwork. Take care of your people.